The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of WBBZ-TV. It's time for Political Buzz, the television forum to discuss politics and issues of interest for all of Western New York. Now, from the WBBZ television studio at the Eastern Hills Mall, this is Political Buzz.
Hello, everyone. John DeSciullo with you, with the executive producer of Political Buzz, our owner, Phil Arno. We're here to join you for the next half hour, and a lot to catch up on. But first, I want to show you some video that I shot the other day. We were down at Rich's Edge Out for Hunger food drive at Rich Products on Niagara Street, Niagara and West Ferry, the food bank of Western New York, working with us. There's our logo, which was splashed across the banner. The big, giant food bank tractor trailer took donations from hundreds of people and cash. Buffalo's finest there, the Buffalo Police, made some donations of turkeys. Joining our friends from the food bank, Mike Bellani and Mary Lou Borowiak and the great people there. And, of course, from 103.3 The Edge, we introduced you to them last week, Ted Shred and Tom Reagan, the morning team there. They did a great job pumping it up and getting people warmed up. It was a rather chilly morning for the big event. And who's who of people, too. New York State Senator Mark Grisanti was there, the Erie County Executive Mark Polenkars, and Mr. Rich there from Rich Products. So you'll be seeing some of those interviews in the coming weeks. And I know on behalf of Phil, we're really happy to support hometown causes like what the Food Bank of West New York does. Now, you may have seen Duke wandering around. That's Carl Palladino's son's dog, late son's dog. Duke is with us on set, but more importantly, we have Carl Palladino and Steve Pigeon, who are back. We haven't seen you gentlemen in a couple of weeks. And Phil and I have been going through the papers, and let me just point out there's a lot to go through with everything that we've been... Phil will drop a few things off to me and say, let's talk about this, and let's talk about that. And later, by the way, in the half hour, Phil Arno, a student of the assassination of JFK, some of the conspiracy theories we're going to discuss. Take a look at some incredible digitized film of that famous Zapruder film. You won't want to miss that as we look back on the 50th anniversary. But first, gentlemen, we'll start with you. First of all, welcome back to the show. I'll start with the rally that was held last night against the governor. Governor Andrew Cuomo was here, raised about $400,000, Steve, I'm to understand, at the Hyatt Hotel on Tuesday night. And Carl, you were there, along with many others that were not happy with this visit. But, Steve, I'll start with you. He came to town. It was primarily a fundraiser.
Yes, it was. And there was more people inside than outside, which I think is important to note. And but I think that the governor has been very strong for Western New York. He'll be back in here at the end of the week with two major economic development announcements. Will be happening on Thursday. And I think he's been paid more attention to this part of the state than any governor in history, and is beginning to pay off for Buffalo and Western New York and all of upstate New York.
Now, do you think, Carl, that's because you ran against him and did pretty well in our upstate counties, Western New York counties? You won against him in the upstate New York area.
I think he's very worried about the big mistake that he made on the SAFE Act. He's very worried about the big mistake he made when he denied fracking. 37 states have the opportunity to frack. 36 of them frack. New York doesn't. In northern Pennsylvania, they hired 232,000 workers at between $75,000 and $100,000 a year. Welders, iron workers, electricians, plumbers. I mean, they put a lot of people to work. A lot of landowners made a lot of money. The governments, the local governments, paid off their debt with the monies, the royalties that were given to them. This was a great economic opportunity for for upstate New York in general. But the vanity of one person, the vanity of Andrew Cuomo, and his arrogance held off for now 3 years. Okay, what should have been the very first day in office, it should have been a proclamation.
And Steve, he held off on that decision for a long time.
I don't think that it's vanity or arrogance. I think he's being very careful about this
How
decision.
careful were 36 other states?
He's trying to be very careful because
36
you see a lot of those
other
people,
states.
a lot of people standing there yesterday were anti-frackers. There's a lot of people concerned about the environment. There's the movies like Gasland that are out. A lot of people concerned that it'll poison the water.
Responsible government makes rules.
I think he's
to
being
deal
very
with the
careful
downside
about the science, and we'll make a decision. I don't think the decision's been made yet, but I do know that he's listening very strong, to the experts and doing his own research on the science. And I think I think it's very hard to say that it's never been proven. There's obviously been incidences where there's been problems, and I think he wants to make sure the science is right.
He's playing with the economic lives of millions of upstaters who could have benefited by this thing. He played with how many people? How many people did he infringe upon with his infringement on the Second Amendment at a time when the whole country was emotionally upset over what had happened in Connecticut? He took advantage and struck so that he could tell the whole world that he is to the left of Obama, that he is to the left of Hillary, and that he is the most progressive governor and the most progressive state in America.
That's not why he did it. He's always been, as you know, a proponent of strong gun regulations.
He imposed himself on.
He said that even in the debate with you, is that he's always been for those gun regulations.
The timing of that was a little suspect because there was such an emotional.
He did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Wait a minute, Steve.
He did exactly what he said he was going to do.
He admitted about 6 months ago. He said he never read the bill and that it was drafted by Bloomberg people. He was trying to skirt. He was trying to dodge the mistake that he made in passing the SAFE Act.
I don't think he's made a mistake, or I don't think he thinks he made a mistake. What he did is what most sensible people want, which is to have stricter legislation on access to assault rifles and to killing machines that caused the Newtown.
Well, first of all,
that's what he did.
That's why we can only have 7 rounds in a clip.
There's no specific definition of assault rifle. It's a word that is thrown out there. It's actually a liberal invention because an assault rifle basically is a rifle that looks like G.I. Joe.
I didn't think it was an invention.
Well, define for me what an assault rifle is.
And I think an assault rifle, and I understand that there's technical definitions, but an assault rifle is when you can pull the trigger once and you don't have to keep pulling. A semi-automatic, you keep pulling the trigger. But the rifles and the machines that have been used, like in the Newtown killings, is what we're trying to say doesn't belong.
But see,
most people believe we have too many guns and too many ability for people who shouldn't have them.
I want to get.
Remember, we have a lot of topics to go through here, Phil.
I want to get the definition straight, just so that we can know what we're talking about. An assault rifle, as you've described it, is a machine gun. If you pull the trigger once and it continues to shoot, that's a machine gun.
Right.
Those have been illegal in the United States for decades.
Yes.
No, you cannot legally buy a machine gun.
Right.
What an assault rifle is pointed to as dangerous is a semi-automatic rifle.
Well, especially when they can have
the vast majority of rifles these days are semi-automatic.
Tell the people in Aurora, Colorado, where he was able to get off 100 rounds.
That's a semi-automatic rifle. It's something
I understand,
that
but that's what we're trying to limit access to.
Let's go on with the question.
We're going to go on. We're going to move on. We have debated this, and we'll continue to, I'm sure, on the show.
Why was there a rally against
why was there a rally? And then, Carl, looking at reports that have been published in the last couple of weeks, are you going to run for governor again? What is the story with the Conservative and Republican Party?
I've told the Republican Party that I think they have become Democrats. They're just wearing costumes as Republicans. The Republican Party leadership was all set to go and just go down the line and do the same old thing they do every 4 years, okay, and pick the candidate, okay, for the rank and file, who then have to tolerate these very treasonous people who they pick to go into office. So in this case, I've said enough is enough. I've watched the legislature sell us out, both houses of the legislature. The Senate under Dean Skelos, the Assembly under Brian Kolb have sold out the Republican values for the last 4 years. I've told the Republican Party, unless you throw Dean Skelos out on his ear and Brian Kolb out on their ear, okay, and Vinny Rada as an example of Rhino County leaders, who also is the vice chairman of the Republican Party, unless you throw that kind of person out and Dean Skelos and Kolb, then I will I will ask the Conservative Party to give me the nod, and I will take that Conservative Party. I'll campaign as hard as I can, and I'll put the Conservative Party on row B. by bringing the Republicans and the conservatives to the conservative line, and I'll put them on row B, and we'll let the Conservative Party be the opposition, because right now we are devoid of any opposition in Albany. As a result, you got Andrew Cuomo, Sheldon Silver, and these characters all doing their own little thing. We've got total corruption. They indicted 12 of them last year, for God's sakes. You have absolutely no opposition government calling these people out and creating a level and a standard of behavior. And without that, the people of the state of New York will continue to get fleeced every year out of more and more money, the highest tax state, the highest regulated state. Jobs are flowing out of here, out of the front door, and we're paying $150,000 per job to encourage people to come in here. But yes, it was so easy for him with the SAFE Act to go and tell Remington and Savage and these other companies, leave the state of New York. We don't want you here. A couple thousand jobs left the state of New York. He didn't cry one bit over that, but he's out there paying his friends and family club $150,000 a job to keep the jobs that they threatened to take out of the state. So this is a lot of nonsense that we've been watching. We're not better off today than we were 4 years ago. And I'm telling the Republican Party, you straighten your own act out. Otherwise, it's a waste of time going into next year. I don't care who the candidate is.
Let's talk a little bit about a fundraiser. Go ahead, Phil.
I have a question regarding that. If you were successful in moving the Republican Party more towards the conservative area.
No, I'm saying we should have a moderate candidate. You can't get a wild-eyed conservative in there either, okay?
Yeah, that was my question.
It has to be a moderate Republican who's willing to engage all elements of the Republican Party and the Conservative Party.
In this day and age,
they have to engage everybody.
Tea
Party, everybody.
There's been a movement of the Republican Party to the left in order, and in New York State, it's almost by necessity because of the way the voters are weighted down in New York City.
That's why these legislative leaders tell us, oh, we're so afraid we're going to lose more seats. Well, the reason you're losing more seats is because all you're doing is playing defense and you're being complicit, all right? If you want to win, the best defense is a good offense, and you get out there and you nail these people, and instead of selling out to them. And Dean Skelos is a sellout. Brian Kolb is a total sellout.
It's not desirable to have Democrat light on the Republican side. You have to offer a clear choice, and one is the conservative and one is the liberal, and to try and move towards the liberal in order to get votes, you're just basically being Democrat light.
My effort will probably ensure Andrew Cuomo getting elected, but it will once and for all establish a value for the Republicans. That's what's happening on the national level right now. You're seeing guys like McCain and Boehner who are becoming irrelevant. They're fighting back, and they don't want to let the new breed in there. After giving us a guy like Mitt Romney who sides with the 1% against the 99%. That didn't make any sense.
Gentlemen, I have to interrupt because we're running very short on time on this very first segment. We have an important second segment. But one thing that Phil brought up, and I do want to address, because it did jump out off the page, and I know we're going to go a little over here. Tony Gioia, respected Republican, fundraiser, where the money is going to go to Congressman Brian Higgins.
He's not a respected Republican anymore, obviously. Respected Republicans do the right thing for their party. This money that he's given to Brian Higgins is going to end up in Nancy Pelosi's little kitty to keep advocating these progressive, absolutely insane legislation like Obamacare, which has destroyed our health care system.
Steve, your comment on that?
Well, obviously, as a Democrat, we'll take funds where they come from. But I think the most important thing that was said by Carl.
As a Democrat, he'll take whatever. He'll even go and they'll fleece the taxpayer too.
I'm not saying that, but I think it's interesting what Carl's talking about is happening probably across the country. It's in terms of when you're an opposition party, do you just become the same as you're opposing and try to outmaneuver them or out-politicize them, or do you stand for an ideology? And that's happening in parties across the state, and especially happens here, especially when you have a legislative party in the state Senate that's led by a majority leader who's been very transactional and seems not to have necessarily a philosophic bent as much as control for control's sake. And one of the problems is that oftentimes in New York State and Albany, it's just been about control for control's sake and not about ideas. Now, I think it's pretty clear. You know where I stand. You know where Andrew Cuomo stands. We've had this argument on guns. We've had it on many other ideas and agendas. But I think it makes an interesting comment that really a lot of those things couldn't have been brought into law without Dean Skelos.
I think the pendulum is starting to swing.
So it'll be an
Starting to
interesting
swing back
political
to
year.
the conservative end.
And
seeing that
a lot
on
of
a
you're
national
going to
level.
see things like, as things are changing, and ideology is the realm of the day instead of pragmatic transactional politics. You're probably going to see some Republican donors giving to Democrats and some Democrats giving to Republicans who might have problems with, have your position on the gun legislation. So it's interesting as times are changing in this century, these interesting alignments are happening.
We don't have time to even get into the Obama issue with his issues with the website. We're going to save that for another show. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back right after this in Political Buzz. We're going to talk about the assassination of JFK, but we will leave you with that website in case you still want some information on Obamacare and the health care issue. We'll be right back right after this. The whole world is remembering the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas in 1963. And as we continue this edition of Political Buzz, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Phil Arno, a student of remembering and looking at and investigating, Emmy Award-winning video and news journalist in Buffalo and in Los Angeles, now owner of this television station. And in addition to what we're going to discuss today, I wanted to also ask Carl and Steve, your thoughts before we get into some of the discussion. Carl, where were you when President Kennedy was shot in 1963?
I was in school, and I was in room 10 at time in high school, and we were in the middle of a class, and it came over the loudspeaper.
Interesting.
And there was complete silence.
Yeah. Steve, you were too young to remember.
I was a baby, but I do know.
You were a baby?
I was a baby. Yes. But I do remember growing up. My parents were both lovers of and supporters of the Kennedys and my family, and I do remember growing up with a sense of knowing that something that we had lost a lot, and the country had lost a lot.
And you said one of your college papers was on the assassination.
Yes, it was.
Now, Phil, you and I had looked at some film, and this is the famous Zapruder film. And Gizmodo, a website, I found this on the web, and Phil and I were looking at it, and that was kind of the reason we decided to take 10 minutes and discuss it. Take a look. This is the Zapruder film, digitized, steadied. You see the motorcade coming across Dealey Plaza there.
Now, the first shot takes place just as he's coming out from the back of this sign. He's been shot. And if you look carefully, you'll see Governor Conley turning around to look at what's happened. And at the very beginning, just after Kennedy is shot, you'll see that the hat that Governor Conley is holding in his right hand, it comes up above the door, and you can clearly see it. Well, according to the Warren report, that hand was severely injured by the same shot that shot Kennedy. And it's virtually impossible for him to have been holding the hat in his hand, turning to look at Kennedy when Kennedy's already been shot, if it was the same bullet. It's impossible.
And we stopped the film just before, obviously, the president's
This is the Warren report.
Shot.
It's 1,000 pages. It's a testament to how self-serving and dishonest government can be under circumstances.
Well, I think the government at the time and documents coming out now show that there was a rush to judgment and they said for national security reasons that they thought there'd be a war fever if Cuban or Russian connections would ever come out, that they basically told the commission, here's the shooter, show how that he did it. So they had made that, rather than saying, let's see where the evidence is going to take us, they said find evidence to prove that he acted alone. Now he may, who knows, he may have been part of it. He may have been part of it, he may have been there to be the patsy. It's awfully odd that he got shot a few days later.
Well, let's take a look at that photo, because
it's interesting.
Jack Ruby, connected to the mob allegedly, and there he is shooting Lee Harvey Oswald, and that individual with the white hat was on Piers Morgan on CNN the other days in his late 80s. He didn't really talk about the conspiracy of it, but it seems to me like there were a whole lot of shady characters intermingled here.
Be able to get in
well,
there.
the other thing, Jim Garrison, who was the prosecuting attorney in New Orleans, actually proved that to a jury, and they confirmed it after the trial was done. He proved that Oswald and Ruby had known each other. They had witnesses that said they saw them together, and there was a connection there, and it was never touched on in the Warren Commission.
He also knew Officer Tippit.
Well, there's
Jack Ruby.
There is some talk that they knew each other.
The Dallas police seemed to patronize his strip club.
Right. Yeah, he was very, very close with the police. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of the archival footage of after Oswald was arrested and he's in police custody, several times through the course of Friday night and Saturday, you'll see Jack Ruby standing there with the photographers and the camera and the news people. You'll see that, and it's as obvious. There's no doubt as to who's standing there. He was.
Well, there was a school of thought that maybe Tippit was supposed to be the guy to take out Oswald rather than having to do it on national TV, and Jack Ruby was the backup. But
if you look at
clearly, John Kennedy, there was a lot of people that had motive and wanted him not there. He had pretty much decided he was going to pull out of Vietnam. The Joint Chiefs of Staff felt that his overtures to Khrushchev after the missile crisis in the American University speech was, they felt, nearly treasonous because he wanted to unilaterally have the test. He did unilaterally agree to do the test ban treaty, and he was suing for peace with the Soviets.
Not to mention the Bay of Pigs with the CIA.
Right. There was a lot of CIA after the Bay of Pigs happened. He felt he was lied to. He fired about 1,000 and broke it into pieces, 1,000 field agents, which I think is pretty hard to do.
And I'll tell you the other thing.
I also think that there was a lot of, we do know for a fact that there was some organized crime that had been working with the CIA to take out Castro, and suddenly Robert Kennedy was turning on some of those same people.
And there is talk that the organized
Our friend
crime.
Roger Stone is saying that he believes Lyndon Johnson was party, knew it was happening, and made sure it got covered up.
One element.
So a lot of interesting things probably we'll never know, but
during the 1960 election, it was a very, very close election, and it came down to Illinois and Chicago, and there was talk. See, Joe Kennedy made a lot of his money from bootleggers during the Depression. That's where a lot of that wealth came from, and he was supposedly connected to some of the organized crime people.
He was wealthy before that, but there's some allegations he made some money in business with them as partners.
And I think that's
I think what he was doing is, like the Brofmans, he was having Irish whiskey. He owned them in Ireland.
Right.
They owned them in Canada. They did it legally.
He was a bootlegger.
Picked it up. They don't know
let's just call it like it was. He was a bootlegger. And
I don't think he actually
the mob
the whiskey
helped.
I think he owned it in Ireland.
Through all the connections, organized crime helped Kennedy get elected in 1960. And then, as you say, Robert Kennedy made organized crime a target of the federal government. And the organized crime does not take kindly to being,
but I don't think they would have the power
double-crossed.
to do something like that by themselves.
By themselves.
Maybe they could be used, but they certainly couldn't make the Warren Commission happen.
No. And the Warren
That had
Commission
to
is
come out of
interesting because
the national
you mentioned
security agencies.
You mentioned the idea that they were afraid that there would be an international payback if we didn't handle it correctly. There might lead to a war, whatever. The Warren Commission came out after all the emotion was done. It came out several months later when things had calmed down, and there really was no need to cover up what actually happened, especially if there was an internal conspiracy and didn't make any connection to outside countries. So the Warren Commission cover-up doesn't make sense on that level unless you're covering something else up.
Carl, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've heard Steve and Phil. What are your thoughts?
My whole life I've heard the conspiracy theories and watched the movies and that, and like every American, it's just something that sits there on the shelf, and you're waiting for somebody to come out with some conclusive evidence, somebody to speak out that was there and whatever, and someday maybe we'll know. Someday maybe we'll know why Obama told the military to stand down and leave our troops on the battlefield. I mean, someday maybe we'll be able to hear these things, because I think that's innate in us, that truth eventually comes out. I would hope so.
This one may not, but
But Phil, you had an interesting comment that, you know, and in watching some of the interviews that you've seen on network television and other places, you see these people who've been involved in this, and you had an interesting comment, as people age, what they might do.
Yeah, we're coming now to a time when anybody who was connected with that assassination, it's 50 years later, anybody who might have taken part, if it was a conspiracy, is probably in their 70s, maybe older. And as people get older and they get to their deathbed, who knows what might come out.
there's a lot of thought that the people that believe that it wasn't a conspiracy say that there's no way that big of a secret could be kept.
Well, I was going to ask that.
There's another school of thought that believe that those people never lived to have gray hair.
Well,
They had knowledge too.
there's also a record of a number of people who were witnesses and who were connected in some way to Oswald or to Ruby, and they all died very mysterious and unnatural deaths. And someone did calculation that, you know, if you take these 1,000 people and that died within a couple of years after the assassination, the odds of any random 1,000 people nationwide or worldwide to die like that would be astronomical.
And we do know history. It's beyond proof that it was a very dangerous time, that the intelligence agencies in both parts of the Iron Curtain were doing all kinds of illegal, nefarious black jobs,
Different time.
including assassinating foreign leaders.
Yeah.
The Vietnam leader assassinated, the Congo leader assassinated by our intelligence agencies, attempts on Castro. I'm sure the Russians,
so you
KGB, were assassinating people.
Gentlemen,
so a lot of stuff may never come out.
So, Steve, you don't believe in Hillary Clinton's "what does it matter anymore"?
It's so long ago.
Well, it was certainly
I think Benghazi and the Kennedy, you can't compare those two.
certainly a tragic event in history, and we remember it here on Political Buzz. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Political Buzz. Phil Arno from WBBZ, the owner of our station, here with us, and of course Carl and Steve. Carl, you said one thing during the break that was rather interesting about JFK, as we have literally 1 minute left. He was an inspiration.
He was an inspiration. He inspired the masses, and his loss was a big loss for this country.
It was.
It was and the way he died was a tragedy. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we will see you in a few weeks back on Political Buzz. Steve Pigeon, Carl Palladino.
Hopefully
Phil
I'll have
Arno.
my voice by then.
Right. We wish you good health, and we thank you for joining us every Thursday morning at 9 a.m., Sunday morning at 11 a.m. on WBBZ-TV, your hometown television station. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.